For this tutorial, you would need yarn, and here I'm using a double knit, which is a category 3 or a light worsted yarn. Now, you'll know that yarns come with different weights, and this is the most common of all yarn weights. So it's going to be really easy for you to get this particular yarn. Here you'll see it's 100% acrylic, and the recommended hook on the yarn is a 4mm hook, which I will be using as well. It's a 4mm hook that you see here, and the US size is a G-6. And generally a skein of double knit category 3 light worsted yarn comes in 100 grams. Now this is called a skein or a ball of yarn. And then you've got all your instructions on the label. You've got the approximate length of the yarn that's in the skein. So that's what we'll be using. For this tutorial, we'll need 2 skeins. We'll also need, apart from our hook, the 4mm hook, we'll need a pair of scissors and a yarn or a wool needle. Now you'll see that this needle is different. It's got a larger eye so that you're able to thread in your yarn. Now let's talk about the way that we hold the hook and yarn. This really isn't something that I can teach you. It's individual to everyone. There's no set way of holding the hook and the yarn. It would just go with practice, and it's all about you finding what's comfortable for you. The way that I hold it is with my left hand. I bring in my yarn. Begin with that slip knot. Let me just show you. And here's it, and that's the way that I hold my hook and yarn. So like I said, you need to go about figuring out what's the best way for you to hold that hook and yarn. There's generally 2 ways of beginning a pattern. Well, 2 ways that I know of. The first is a slip knot, which we will be working for this pattern, and the other is called a magic ring. Now we generally use the magic ring when we're working something in the round. Think of placemats, and here I have one, and you'll see that here's the start of the placemat, and we've worked it in the round. So in order to do that, we first formed a magic ring at the start. It's used for placemats that are round, or coasters that are round, or sometimes you may even start off a beanie with a magic ring, and then you use it most of the time when you're working origami projects. So for this tutorial, we're not using a magic ring, but for the sake of interest, I will show you how to. So here I've got my yarn, and this is the shorter end here on the side is the tail end of the yarn. So I'll take the tail end and I'll hold it on like so, and then I'm turning it around onto my fingers, and I'm forming an X right at the top. So here's the longer end of my yarn that's attached to the ball or skein. So with my hook, I'll go under that tail end of the yarn, and I'll catch onto the longer length of yarn, and I'll pull it through and under. Then it's twisted around, and I'll go back to that longer length of yarn, and I'll yarn over and bring it through that loop on my hook. So here you have it, and this is called a magic ring. Now what we do is we'll work all our stitches into that ring. Let me just show you. I'll work all my stitches into this ring. And once I'm done with the number of stitches needed for the pattern, I can pull on the tail end of the yarn to close up on that ring. And that's how I bring it all together. So that was a magic ring. But like I said, we're not using that for this pattern. Instead, we'll work with a slip knot. Now for me, the easiest way to make a slip knot is if I've got my yarn, here's the tail end, and it's folded here with just a little bit of the tail end here. So I'll take my yarn and I'll hold it down, and I'll, on the other side, on the folded end, I'll twist it around, forming an X, and then I'll go through and I'll pick up on the longer length of the yarn, and I'll pick it up and I'll pull it through that knot. And here I have my little loop from that slip knot. So I place my hook in that loop and I can pull through on that longer length to bring it to a close. So you don't want to pull it too tight at this point. Otherwise, you'll find it difficult to get your chain through this loop on the hook. So you can pause the video and practice that if you don't know how to, or you can continue. Now, we begin our pattern with a foundation chain. And here we're working chains, a length of chains, in order to start off the pattern. Now to work that length of chains, we need to yarn over, pull through, pull up a loop through the hook here, and that was the first chain. So again, it's yarn over and pull through the hook, yarn over, pull through. That was my third chain. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. And you continue until you have a length of chains. Now you may feel you may need to practice this in order to get what you're looking for, is to get an even feel of the chains. So you don't want to have chains that are too big or too small or too tight. You want them all evenly spaced out. You can pause the video at this point to practice your chain. When you've got your chain, there may be times when you're working a pattern. The pattern will tell you to work your stitches. Like generally you work your stitches going from, here's the front of the chain, and you work your stitches going from the front of the chain. But sometimes a pattern will say work your stitches into those little bumps at the back of the chain. This is the back of the chain. So if you look at the difference, here's the front of the chain and here's the back of the chain. Now those little bumps are these little, exactly what it is, bumps at the back of the chain, and that's where you work your stitches. When you work your stitches into those little bumps, if I can show you here, I'll just work a few just to give you some idea of what it looks like. What actually happens is your stitches they form clear stitches at the top. So if you turn it around, you've got nice clear stitches to work with, as opposed to working your stitches from the front of the chain like so. And I'll show you what's the difference between the two now. So you'll see, by working your stitches into the little bumps, you get a clear stitch to work with. And whereas when working them from the front, there's no actual stitches to work with. So sometimes a pattern may ask you to work those stitches into those little bumps, and here it is. You'll know what is meant by that. I've continued on with my chain, and I have 28 chains in total. In order to work this pattern, we need a length of chains, and for the scarf, this will determine the width of our scarf. Now this pattern is in multiples of 3, and for my foundation chain, I need this chain in multiples of 3 plus 1. By that I mean the stitch pattern that I'll be working is in multiples of 3, and that plus 1, it counts as a turning chain. In order for me to turn to the next round, I need that turning chain. So you'll work your chain until you get to 28 chains. Round 1. Into the second chain from the hook, single crochet. So if you look at it, here's this loop that's attached to the hook, and that never counts as a chain. And here's my first chain, and there's the second. So into that second chain is where I'll be working, starting off my stitches. So to single crochet, it's insert your hook into that second chain, pull up a loop, and I have 2 loops on my hook, yarn over and go through 2 loops on the hook. And you'll continue with single crochets to the end of the chain. So again, into that next chain, insert your hook, pull up a loop, you have 2 loops on your hook, yarn over and go through 2 loops on the hook. Again, into the next chain, insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through both loops on the hook. Continue with single crochets to the end of the round. I've continued on working those single crochets throughout that chain. Now if you look at my stitches, here's the top, and if you count the number of stitches, you must have 27 stitches. Okay, let me just explain a little bit about these stitches for future reference. So when you're working a pattern, you generally work it into the entire stitch. By that I mean you go through the whole stitch, the front loop of the stitch and the back loop. That's how you would work a pattern. But there comes a time where you may need to work your stitch into either the front loop, this is the front loop, it's the one closest to you, or the back loop, and that's the one away from you. That's the back loop. So your stitch is made up of a front loop here and a back loop. Generally for ribbings, we work our stitch into the back loops only. For this pattern, we'll work our stitch into the entire stitch. So going back to the side where we've ended, we'll move on to round 2. Chain 1, which is our turning chain, and turn. Into that same chain stitch from where that chain 1 comes out of. Here's it, it's joined to that first stitch. Work a half double crochet. So to work a half double crochet, it's yarn over, insert your hook into the stitch, pull up a loop. I have 3 loops on my hook, yarn over and go through all 3 loops on the hook. And that was a half double crochet. Now for this stitch pattern, we need to work a single crochet, a half double crochet, and a double crochet all into one stitch. That turning chain right at the start, it counted as my single crochet. So here's my half double crochet, and to work a double crochet, it's yarn over, insert the hook into that same stitch where we had worked a half double crochet, pull up a loop. I've got 3 loops on my hook, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook. I have 2 loops on my hook, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook. So that was a double crochet. Then it's skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, and into that next stitch is where I'll work the next stitch pattern. So we'll begin with a single crochet into that stitch, insert your hook into the stitch, pull up a loop. With 2 loops on my hook, yarn over, go through all 2 loops on the hook. That was a single crochet. Into that same stitch, I'll work a half double crochet. So it's yarn over, insert the hook into that same stitch, pull up a loop. I've got 3 loops on my hook, then it's yarn over and go through all 3 loops on the hook. Into that same stitch, I'll work a double crochet. So it's yarn over, insert the hook into that same stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook. Now the stitch pattern is skip 2 stitches, so it's 1, 2, into that next stitch, I'll work a single crochet, which is insert the hook into that stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, and go through 2 loops on the hook. Into that same stitch, I'll work a half double crochet. So it's yarn over, insert the hook into that same stitch, pull up a loop. With 3 loops on my hook, yarn over, go through all 3 loops on the hook. That was a half double crochet. And then I need to work a double crochet into that same stitch. So it's yarn over, insert the hook into that stitch, pull up a loop. With 3 loops on my hook, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook. And then again, the stitch pattern is skip 2, 1, 2, into that next stitch, work a single crochet, a half double crochet, and a double crochet. So you continue on with this stitch pattern to the end of the round. I've continued on with my stitch pattern. Here I am right at the end, and I have 2 stitches to go. So if you look at it here, I have these 2 stitches to go. So I'm going to skip the 1 stitch, and into that last stitch I'll work a single crochet. Round 3, chain 1 and turn. Into that same stitch from where the chain 1 comes out of, I'll work a half double crochet and a double crochet. So here's my chain 1, and there's that stitch right at the start, and into that stitch is where I'll work my 2 stitches. So for my half double crochet, it's yarn over, insert the hook into that stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through all 3 loops on the hook. For my double crochet, it's yarn over, insert the hook into that same stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook. Then my stitch pattern is skip 2. Here's 1, 2, and into that 3rd stitch, work a single crochet, a half double crochet, and a double crochet, all into that 1 stitch. Then it's skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, into that 3rd stitch, it's a single crochet, a half double crochet, and a double crochet, all into that 1 stitch. And you continue on with this stitch pattern to the end of the round. So it's skip 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, into the 3rd stitch, work a single crochet, a half double crochet, and a double crochet, all into that 1 stitch. Continue to the end of the round. I've continued on with round 3, and here I am right at the end with 2 stitches to go. So I'll skip the 1 stitch, and into the last stitch I'll work a single crochet. So for the rest of the pattern, we will repeat round 3 until we get to the length that we want our scarf at. So let me show you. It's just a repeat from now onwards. It will be a chain 1, turn, into that same stitch from where the chain 1 comes out of, I'll work a half double crochet and a double crochet, then it's skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, into that 3rd stitch, I'll work a single crochet, a half double crochet, and a double crochet, all into 1 stitch, and I'll continue with this stitch pattern to the end of the round. That's a single crochet, a half double crochet, and a double crochet. Skip 2, 1, 2, then it's a single crochet, a half double crochet, and a double crochet all into the one stitch, skip 2, 1, 2, then it's a single crochet, a half double crochet, and a double crochet all into one stitch, skip 2, single crochet, half double crochet, double crochet all into one stitch, skip 2, single crochet, half double crochet, double crochet all into one stitch, skip 2, single crochet, half double crochet, double crochet all into one stitch, skip 2, 1, 2, single crochet, half double crochet, double crochet all into one stitch, and then to end the round it's skip 1 stitch into that last stitch, single crochet to end the round. Before going on any further, I need to show you how to change your yarn, because you will come to a point where you need to move on to the next skein. You finish the first skein and you'll need to move on to the next skein. And to do that, I prefer changing yarn at a double crochet. So in my stitch pattern, I'm coming to the end of the skein, and here I've worked a single crochet and a half double crochet. I'll work my double crochet. So it's yarn over, insert your hook into that same stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook, and that's where I'll stop before I change my yarn. So while holding on the yarn, I'll bring in my new skein. Here's my new skein, and I've left a little tail end sort of, and I folded it here, and I'll take that folded end and I'll get my hook into that. I'll bring it through those last two loops on the hook to complete the double crochet. So that tail end of the yarn, the shorter end, I'll hold it firmly down while continuing on with the pattern. So then it's skip 2, 1, 2 into that next stitch. I'll work a single crochet, then it's a half double crochet and a double crochet, and you can see that I've successfully changed yarn. Here, this tail end of the yarn, we will weave it into the pattern at the end. So you'll continue on with the pattern using that new skein of yarn. So I've continued on working the stitch pattern, and I came to the end of that first skein of yarn. Then I joined to my next skein and I worked the pattern to the end. Well, it's basically to the length that you want your scarf at. You can stop at any time. Now here I am at the end of the round, and I'll show you how to fasten off. So to fasten off, I've worked my last stitch was that single crochet into the last stitch. So to fasten off, it's just one chain, a chain 1, and I'll pull through on my yarn, on the tail of the yarn, and then with my scissor I can cut that tail end here. Now you always want to leave a slightly longer tail end, because you need to weave in these ends into the pattern. To complete the scarf, we need to weave in all these tail ends that we have wherever we've joined yarn, and it's generally at the start and at the end. So using that yarn needle, you'll thread it in. Now the scarf, with this pattern, there's no right side and wrong side. You would just choose one side to weave in the ends. Generally, when working a pattern, we weave in the ends into the wrong side. So here it's just a matter of going back and forth into these stitches any which way, just back and forth, and all you want to do here is to lose that tail end into the pattern. So I prefer going back and forth in all directions. I just find that I'm able to lose that end a lot better. So once I've done that, and I can cut off this excess yarn, and I'll weave in all the remaining ends, and that completes the scarf.